What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, hope you're doing well. So today the dev posted their Q&A session thingy. I thought I'd take a look at it and give my opinion on some of the changes they are planning to make. This is a very long list, so I might not cover everything. I'm gonna cover as much as possible, but I'm gonna cover the most important things first. For example, bricks will remain a thing until 2025. That was one of the questions I saw earlier, and basically the dev said they were planning to address it in 2025. The first question is about the Ripper. Someone mentioned that it's not effective at all in Clan Wars or at the higher power scores. He also mentioned that it's not really a mine layer because it shoots discs, like melee discs, into the ground. So he was wondering if the devs are gonna do something about the weapon, because keep in mind, this is a relic. So he was wondering if the devs could make it work or increase the damage of it if you're using a Tormentor module, which sounds very interesting, and the devs said they might implement it and test it, but they cannot change the interaction of the stuck disc. The next question was, Rippers, Typhoon, Firebox, Porcupine, Punishers, and Jormungandrs are really ineffective. I have to disagree. Apart from the Ripper and the Jormungandr kind of works out. I find it a little bit too tricky to use for a relic weapon, but they are planning to make some tweaks to that. But the Typhoon is really strong, Firebug really strong, Porcupine really strong even after the nerf. Well, I won't say really, but you know, it's still pretty good. And for the Punishers, I've heard that it's still pretty effective, but they're planning to see if they need to make adjustments because of the removal of the hit scan mechanic. Someone asked a question about melee builds, said that they were a little bit too effective. The dev mentioned they are aware of it, but the only solutions they have right now is a global redesign of the physics of builds. And right now they have a pretty nice schedule with the brawls and the battle passes, so that's not really priority for them. I'm just speaking with my own words, that's not what they said, but they have their hands busy. They always say that they're a small team. In the future they might work on it, but right now it's pretty tricky. I do agree, it's a pretty tricky issue to fix. The next question is about the Cami Cabin, and people always ask me to play the Cami Cabin, but I always say the same thing. The perk is nice and all, but it doesn't offer me anything special. If you get chilled, you know, you can negate that. If you get heated, you can negate that. Sparks can negate the effect of the spark and the flash. And before the cap can or any mine layer sticks onto you, it also negates that. But it's not really a special perk, to be honest. It is cool, but it's not amazing. And they mentioned as part of the next balance change, they will try to improve the perk. Maybe a longer duration time and a faster reload. The next question is about the bricks, that heavy builds get way too much of a speed boost. And they are aware of this issue, but it will only be addressed next year, in 2025. I think we can all agree that bricks are an issue. The thing with Crossout is, a while back, they reduced a lot of the top speed of the cabins because they said the game was a little bit too fast-paced, too fast for their taste. So they slowed everything down. I don't know what happened, but after a while, they increased the speed of everything again. And I mean, if you look at real-life applications, big, heavy vehicles move extremely slow, but they offer a lot of protection. For me, it's that simple, but for some reason, they're not doing it. The next question is a very interesting one because I had no idea this was the case. I mean, I've played them and they felt okay, very strong. I even did a video on it and it was kind of funny. But apparently, the meat grinders, the augers, are the most powerful or the most popular movement part right now. And this guy was complaining about it. Oh, they're too strong. Yeah, they're too strong. Nerf them, nerf them. And the dev mentions the meat grinders haven't been good for years. So now that they're good, they're not gonna immediately change them back. They're just gonna collect some data and make some tweaks where it's needed. Personally, I think the meat grinders are fine right now. I haven't really experienced anybody abusing or annoying me with the meat grinders. It's a good counter for melee, a little bit, not really, but you know, if the melee melees you, you can also deal some damage to him at least, and maybe against fire dogs as well. And what's also nice, if you're disarmed, you still have meat grinders. That is such a good feature. Like, why do you want to change it now? I mean, never mind, let's just continue. Someone also complained about the Tachi, that it's super weak now. The nerf was really too much. And the devs say, nope, the Tachi is fine. And also, by the way, I showed you guys how to use the Tachi now. Just use it in a V-shaped build and you're good to go. Someone also complained about hidden Gravistars being really efficient. And yes, I do agree, because when they're on top, they fall off super quick. But if they're in the bottom, you know, they are a serious threat. And the devs mentioned they're basically not going to touch the Gravistars. Someone complained about the spider legs being dead in Clan Wars. And the dev mentioned that they are aware, but they are still pretty popular in other game modes, so they're not gonna change anything there. Someone had a question for tacklers that they're still a little bit too weak even with the energy reduction. And the dev mentioned before they do anything, they want to see how it performs with the hit scan mechanic change. And I use the 6 tacklers or 7 tacklers combo, and it kind of works, but the tacklers have a very high spread. I think if they fix the spread, maybe give it a little bit more damage, because they remove the damage. They remove 10% more damage when they reduce the energy. Give it the 10% more damage back, and maybe give it a little bit less spread. The spread is way too high. The next question is also talking about mechanical legs. It mentions that the Bigfoot and the Titan wheels are just far more superior in terms of durability compared to like the mechanical legs. And you can also push builds with mechanical legs a lot easier. And again, the devs mentioned that they do not plan to change the mechanical legs. Their reasoning for it is because you can use mechanical legs in the front of your build, or the rear, or the side as extra protection. You cannot do that with normal wheels. So if you increase the durability of mechanical legs, people will use that as armor basically in the front and the rear of their build. People are really upset with the nerf of mechanical legs, and I do agree. I use them a lot less now. So the first one is for leg survivability against flame weapons. Legs cannot compete with Dracos and Fire Dogs. Yes, that is kind of an issue. I remember back in the day, if a Draco came up to you, basically if you used a spider, it was an anti-fire build. But nowadays, they just spin you and hold you there, and there's not much you can do. And again, they do not plan to change the rotation speed of the legs, but they might add a resistance to fire damage in the future. I think that's fair. Higher resistance to melee and fire, I think that's fair. And they might also increase the tonnage of the mechanical legs in the future. I do have a feeling right now they're more focused on the robotic legs instead of the older stuff. I mean, that's how they make money. Who cares about the older content? New content is what's interesting. The next question is referring to builds that use weapons under their build, not melee weapons, just like bullet damage weapons like Reapers, Gravistars. Goblin is a little bit of an exception, but again, goblins. And this person mentions that those builds are a little bit too effective against traditional melee builds, where they also have melee weapons mounted low to their build. And the response of the devs are, it's gonna be a case-by-case situation. For example, the Yongwang is already getting nerfed because of that. Other weapons, if they are too effective, they might also remove the ability to flip it upside down, which is unfortunate. I love that freedom, because that is what attracted me to the game. You can basically build whatever you want and just go and fight other players. But with all these changes the devs are making, it feels like everybody is forced to use the same build, which is a brick right now. The next question goes over the special modules that are basically useless. And yeah, the answer is pretty much meh. The devs are gonna just look at the data. Someone was complaining about ramp damage because builds without any weapons can still deal 500 to 700 yellow damage. And the devs basically mentioned that they're not gonna change this because there are not too many complaints about this. I've seen people, you guys know the guys, they just boost all over the map crazy, just ramming you, taking wheels off, taking weapons off randomly. I mean, they're not really super effective. They're just doing random stuff. Sometimes it works. A lot of the time, it doesn't work. So, I mean, there's no reason to complain about that, to be honest. The next question is about the low survivability of the Reapers and the dependency of tracks and rolling-based movement parts on the Golden Eagle engine. And they mentioned that they will increase the durability of the Reapers, but also the mass. And in the future, they might change the perk of the Golden Eagle engine as well. And yes, I do agree. The Reapers fall off a little bit too quick, especially me when I run 4 imps or 4 miniguns. They fall off super fast. Oh, and when they're heated, it's even worse. So the only time I really have fun with Reapers is if I use a Omamore or a Averter or some kind of thing to protect them. I mentioned this in one of my earlier videos, but the experiment the devs did, giving everything 10 or 30% more durability, I think that was perfect, man. They need to bring that back, do another test, having everything survive a little bit longer so you guys can maybe have more time to think on how to engage the enemy. I think that might really work. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want bricks to become bullet sponges now, but it could be interesting to test out for a week, maybe in the form of a brawl or something like that. The next question is about the Stillwind and the Whirlwind. Someone finds them a little bit too weak. And yes, I kind of agree with them. Triple Whirlwind is pretty strong and triple Stillwind as well, but the only change for me, what I would like to see, is a projectile speed increase. That's it. Because you're meant to use them at a longer range, and it's a little bit tricky for me personally. And usually you use them on a stationary build, a slow build to snipe at people. And the problem with that is if you get rushed, it's pretty much game over. They do mention that they might change the perk of the still wind because right now nobody really uses the perk. The next question is about the Omni and the Atom Wheels. This person says they got really bad after the 2 nerf, and yes, I do agree. I don't use my Omni Wheels as often anymore because they do a weird glidey stuff when you're looking left and right quick. It's annoying. It gets me killed so much. If they remove that and make it a little bit more responsive, I want to use them again. But basically, they mentioned that these are still very popular movement parts that are used in every power score, so they don't plan to make changes on it. And yes, I can see that because even if they're slightly bad right now, they still give a pretty unique capability, and that is to strafe left and right while keeping your guns aiming forward. So you sacrifice some flexibility of that for basically better precision, better chances to shoot your enemy. Omnidirectional movement parts definitely have their advantage, even if they're a little bit wonky to use. Sadly, it doesn't look like they're planning to make any changes to these. I do hope they do in the future. Someone complained about the Finwheel engine, that it gives too much of a speed boost to heavy cabins, and they basically mentioned that they're not going to touch the engine, but they do mention that next year they will work on the speeds of vehicles and speed bonuses. So get ready, boys, you're gonna have to change all your builds again. The next question is about the relics. Punisher's Typhoon, Porcupine's Ripper's Flash are significantly worse than other relics in terms of parameters. He also mentions upgraded legendary parts are usually a lot better to use than relics, but the relics still cost 10 times the price of a legendary. And I think the devs give a pretty good answer here. Usability and efficiency of auxiliary weapons depend on the meta. They can show low efficiency in the current meta and be very successful in the next. And I completely agree with that. How many times have you guys seen that I discovered a new meta, or someone who watches me discovers a new meta and sends it to me? Remember the quad destructors for Clan Wars? I started playing that. Nobody was running destructors in 2019. I brought that. It became super popular. The multiple tormentors on a melee build. Steamwheel mentioned that to me. I showed it. I played it a lot. It got nerfed. The Ermac cabin, I got that nerfed pretty much as well. The Tusk cabin was untouched for years. I don't remember who. I think it was Kermit the Frog, because he got me with that funny kill, and I started playing Tusk, and I showed everybody how fun it was and how easy it was to get kills. Tusk got nerfed to the ground. I'm partially responsible for getting most things nerfed because I show it to the community and everybody starts using it. So yeah. Oh, another good example was the Tachi. I made a video on the Tachi saying that it sucks, but then Steamwheel gave me a build with the Tachi where he only used 2, but with the cockpit cabin. Oh my god, I wonder if they have the cockpit cabin in this list because I haven't seen anything yet. But basically, you could use it as a reusable lens. And guess what happened? It also got nerfed, but that one wasn't my fault. Someone asked why the monstrous getting nerfed, and that's basically explain it. Too efficient, pretty straightforward. The next question is kind of vague, but looking at the devs, their answer, this guy wanted to ram people with melee weapons and not receive damage, but they still receive a little bit of damage. And the dev basically mentioned that they're doing it because of balancing issues, because if people use melee weapons to ram people, they would deal damage but not receive damage to the weapons in return, and that is kind of no bueno. The next question was asking for more frequent balance changes, and the dev said no. A couple of people complained about the toll because it's too efficient, and they were asking if the devs are going to change it, and they said no because it's the same story for the augurs. For years, these were bad. Augurs, the toll, the enlightenment is still bad, but these items were super duper bad. Now they got a pretty nice buff and they're actually usable. I mean, when I'm using a hover and I get hit by a toe, yeah, it's devastating, but it's my fault for getting hit. You know, just avoid the missile or shoot it. The next question has something to do with the way the devs balance the game. The guy mentions that they need to make small incremental changes instead of one big number change. And I have mentioned this a couple of times. I think some of the changes they make are too big and too aggressive. For example, do you guys remember the grenade launcher change, the GL55? They gave it like 5 changes at once. And I'm 99% sure that the devs do not test these things properly. Maybe in the garage a little bit, but not in actual PvP or combat. Or maybe they asked some of the Russian content creators. But do you guys remember that? They gave the GL55 5 changes. Damage, projectile speed, turning speed, a couple of other things. And what happened? The GL55 ruled the game, and then they basically reverted the changes. Or sometimes I see changes like 30% more or 30% less. That's a big jump. 30% is a lot. So I do agree with smaller changes, but looking at their answer, I think they think it's justified. And looking at the response, it looks like they find their way of doing it right now the best. So I personally think smaller changes will be a lot better. I know they cannot do more changes because maybe the staff size, but smaller changes will, I don't know, it just makes sense that it's going to be better. Someone mentioned that nail guns are a little bit too weak, and yes, in terms of durability, yes, and that is the only thing. Their damage, everything else is fine. The next question is about the bricks again, and the dev mentioned that in the future, they'll change the speed of builds, and this guy was asking for a buff to the cap cans, and I say no, and the devs also say no. I don't want to deal with the cap cans anymore. It was my most hated weapon in the game. It's still okay, it's decent if used to, but it's in a good place. Let it stay there and die. The next question is about the assemblers. They were buffed and then immediately nerfed again because they were too strong. And this person recommends increasing the energy a little bit, just like the Varuns or the Raijin. And they mentioned that they will consider this option and test it. So pretty good. I think assemblers were good for that short period. Very strong, very deadly, but again, keep in mind, it is a projectile-based weapon. It doesn't fly. I think it flies as fast as the Scorpion, so there's still room to dodge. But I remember when someone was in cloak and snuck up to you, you are losing your guns, my guy. The next question is about the Raijin, that it's still too strong, and the devs will make some adjustments. Someone complained that the Raijin is still too strong, and I would have to agree. I knew that the last change did nothing. It basically did nothing. But they might reduce the ammo count, and they might also implement additional changes if it's still too effective. They are already planning to give it an energy increase, so let's see how that works first, and then if that's not enough, then I think they can do something else. The next question is about blast damage. This guy wants perks that give more damage to have the damage separated. Weapons that deal explosive damage get less of a bonus, and weapons with non-explosive bullets get more damage bonus. For example, the Whirl autocannon would get 30% more damage from the marsh, but for example, the Whirlwind would only get 50% more damage from the Marsh Cabin. I can see where this guy's coming from, but I personally don't think it's necessary either. And the devs also don't think so. It's like, why? I mean, I get it, but like, nah, dude, it's too much work. But the dev mentioned they have big plans for a big rework of blast damage in general, but they cannot share more details at the moment. The next question is about the new perk they're adding to the Oppressor engine, and basically mentioning it that if you move faster, your projectile speed is better, but if you move slow, your projectile speed is different. So you would have to calculate your shot each time depending on your speed, which he finds annoying. But the dev mentioned everything is working as intended and he should test it. I have not tested it yet, but I might test it this weekend. The next question is about melee weapons. This guy complained that they're not always dealing damage because of how they interact with the enemy's build. Funny guy. And the dev mentioned melees are already pretty effective, man, and I agree, they're already pretty good, man. The next question is basically a suggestion to the devs because he does not want the devs to change speed, and I'm still kind of on the fence on that. I think heavy cabins should be a little bit slower. Medium and lights are fine, they should be a little bit faster, but heavies, melee, bricks, every brick, they're a little bit too fast for the amount of durability they carry. But he basically mentions don't touch the speed, just increase the gravity by 2 times and remove the ice from the ground. And the dev mentioned in order to do all of that, it will require a lot of changes which they do not have plans for right now, maybe in the future. The next question is about bricks again, and the devs basically give the same answer. Question after that is also about mechanical legs, and the dev gives the same answer as well. The next question is not really a question, but the person wants the devs not to just mindlessly nerf everything once a problem arises. And I kind of agree with that because whenever there's an issue, ooh, nerf. Oh, that's too strong, nerf. Oh, that's too good, nerf. Oh, that's weird, nerf. I think if you tweak parameters of certain weapons, you might make them viable without nerfing them into the ground. But then again, I'm not a game dev, I'm just a content creator. The next question is hilarious. This guy complains about the introduction of ammo, and now he needs to recreate all of his builds again. That's too funny, man. But I understand his frustration. But isn't that also a fun part of the game? Building or redesigning your build? Grabbing builds from the exhibition and making it your own. But I do understand his frustration, and I hope the devs also do something about the freaking blueprint slots, man. And I hope the devs do something about the freaking blueprint slots, man. It is way too expensive for me right now. If I want to get one more slot, it will cost me the same price as a legendary weapon. What kind of BS is that? I know Crossout is pay to win and super expensive game, and I know, but still, man, you gotta do something about that. They have to. Come on. The next question is about the sidekick drone. This person says they are unplayable right now because they were nerfed into oblivion. People with their exaggerated words. So funny. Yeah, and he also complains about the AI. Dude, the AI of drones is really something else. But when it comes to the AI of cannon bots, yeah, they are 100% accurate and they will not miss. When it comes to the AI of the last bot alive, I think they have a coding in there that if it's one last bot alive, it's extra retarded. But I do think they need to increase the efficiency and the AI of the wheel drones. I think only wheel drones have this issue. And of course, the new Phantoms. The next question is basically a question about wedging. And someone mentioned that the Gazan and the Plow Blade wedge a lot of builds very easily. And yes, I do agree. I don't know why it is, but whenever I use a Gazan and I ramp someone, he basically goes on top of me. I don't know what it is, but they mentioned that they will look into that. The next question is about mechanical legs as well, and the devs give the same reply, but they also mentioned that they do not plan to increase the efficiency of the hovers, which is understandable. The next question is someone mentioning that basically the devs are removing the freedom of creating something fun and unique. For example, the underslung Yongwang or something tricky to have an advantage over your enemy. And he is against that dev change it or nerf it or remove it. Oh, a good example is the horizontal Mandrake. The devs kind of, yeah, I'm still upset about that. If you guys might not know the horizontal Mandrake, but the horizontal Mandrake had devastating. But the build was basically garbage. If you hit it in the right spot, it would not be efficient anymore. So I do agree that sometimes they do remove some fun builds that they don't really hurt anybody. I mean, they hurt you because they deal a ton of damage, but that's the uniqueness of Crossout, or at least it was. I have a fear that pretty soon when the devs make so many changes where the game is basically just one single build, a brick, a lot of people are going to stop again. I kind of already feel it, but I am not sure if it's the case. Basically, they mentioned that they are not against interesting and original solutions for building armored cars, but the design must still remain in balance relative to other weapons, parts, and armored cars. Which again, like I mentioned earlier, instead of nerfing something outright, change the parameters, man. They have some kind of weird way they calculate stuff because they mentioned a lot of times this weapon is medium, so it's good how it's performing right now. I would say just change some of the parameters around. Don't remove the ability to flip it any way we want. For example, the toe. I want to shoot my toe in the air, but I can't because they don't allow it to be flipped. I don't know why. The next question is about the low efficiency of the alignment. It's a pretty garbage weapon. I would call it a module, but it's a weapon. This guy suggests a change, but another change I would say is let it have an area of effect where people in a certain area cannot cloak up. That would be kind of fun. I think if you were able to fire the beacon somewhere on the ground, and everywhere like 50 meters around the beacon would be the special zone where people cannot cloak up, or if you drive through it you will get decloaked, and it will also show you maybe a highlight of the enemy, something cool, kind of like what this guy suggested. The next question was about the Barrier 9. This guy wants it to be a little bit better, but the devs say no. The next question is about the new rear generator. This guy wants it to be a little bit smaller because it's rare, and the dev also say no. The next question is referring to a very specific situation to where if you are using, let's say, a melee build and you're hitting a spider build, you can sometimes go under the build, and this guy's complaining about that. But the devs say, we ain't gonna make some changes, bruh. Deal with it. I get what he means, but it's basically not an issue. Although I do wish mechanical legs had crushing ability to where if you were under them, under a spider build, you would get periodic damage, kind of like what the auger does right now. But that might be a little bit too strong, but it would be cool to see. The next question is about the atoms and omni wheels being on ice. I think it is the issue I was talking about. If you're stationary and you look left and then right real quick, your build will do a weird spin thing. I don't know what the heck that is, but it is extremely annoying in combat. But they do plan to take a look at it, so that's good news. The next question is talking about builds where you can use a brick, hide the weapon inside, even though it's a rotatable weapon, but it can still work normally. You can see that a lot at the higher echelons of the game where people basically have their rotating weapons set in a stationary position, like the Mammoth, for example. That's a good one. Or the Mastodon. That way, it keeps the accuracy. That's what I've noticed. Because in normal PvP, if you look left, right, around you, Your weapon tends to rotate with the camera movement, but that basically increases the bloom of your cannon shot, which is annoying. They will address it in the next update, so hopefully it becomes better, but I don't really have an issue with it. It makes a build better because having an exposed weapon is just stupid in Crossout right now. And the dev also mentioned that they do not plan to make any changes to this. The next question is talking about speed of movement parts, and that all movement parts except for normal wheels have a speed limitation, and other movement parts then become a little bit less fun. And it looks like the devs might do something with the Phobos co-driver where it can increase the speed of the movement part, and they also mentioned the rework of the Golden Eagle engine again. And then we have an insane gentleman over here. This guy wants to buff Cloak. He wants to make it harder for you to disrupt invisibility. That is hilarious. The devs immediately shut him down with a no. Invisibility is a strong enough mechanic, and I 1000% agree. The next question is about tracks and heavy builds not able to push like small builds with wheels. And the devs basically mentioned here that they are closely monitoring the situation because they recently did buff the tracks a little bit, and they've also become slightly more popular. The next question is referring to people that use high tier weapons in the lower power scores. And the devs basically mentioned here that if people do that, it will make their build a lot weaker. And yes, I do agree, but that doesn't mean they're not efficient. But they say that such builds do not stand out. Maybe not with relics or legendaries. I mean, epics are still a little bit low tier, I guess. I can't remember right now if there's a situation where high tier weapons, except for the Raijin, where high tier weapons are dominating low tier weapons or low tier matches. I remember the Spectre was a thing, but that's also an epic. Maybe the devs are referring to relics and legendary weapons. I have seen single breaker builds, but I can't really say if they were super efficient or not. Maybe they're right. If you guys know of any builds right now or any metas with high tier weapons at lower power score, let me know in the comment section up below, because I remember there's a couple of annoying builds to deal with, like mostly the Raijin, to be honest, and melee, but I don't remember anything else being super annoying. The next question is someone complaining about how you mount your weapons on the Omamori or a Jaggi or something like that, because you can only comfortably mount 2 weapons on it, like 2 big weapons instead of 4 small weapons. I mean, technically you can, brother, but your build's gonna be ugly. And the dev's answer is basically a math lesson to this guy. They don't really mention anything. The next question is about the cabins, because this guy finds that having cabins exposed and hiding all your structural parts makes those types of build a little bit too strong, especially with maybe like the Grizzly co-driver. Because if you have your cabin exposed but still hide all your structural parts, your cabin can have a very big health pool, and this guy does not like that. I remember the only people who really took advantage of this was the Worm players back in the day. They had their cabin exposed, all their armor was in the back, and they were using Reapers and did extremely well until they nerfed the meat grinders. Doesn't look like the devs are planning to make changes to this mechanic, but they will change the Grizzly co-driver's perk. But that won't do much because you can still use the Irma cabin, for example. The next question is about the weakness of shields, and I do agree. The Nova shield, pretty weak, but still effective. The Aegis shield, on the other hand, that's a useless module right there. I mean, not super useless. No, I said that wrong. It's not super useless, but it's pretty bad. This guy basically wants improvements on the shields, and the devs mentioned that they will make improvements to the Nova cabin without changing the interaction with an installed Aegis shield, of course, which kind of makes sense, but I would like to see that change reversed just for a small period to see if it would really break the game. They do mention that builds that use this, their efficiency was too high, but now with the energy rework, you can increase the cost of the Aegis and remove that limitation, kind of balance it out. Now, those builds were strong because they were using an infinite bubble trick, but I think, yeah, all they need to do is make some tweaks instead of nerfing it, and I think it would still be fine. By the way, they also mentioned to show you a visual indicator of the shield's durability, which is something I really wanted to see. So I'm happy that might be a change that is coming in the future. I also want to see individual durability numbers for my weapons and certain modules. That would also be super duper helpful. This was actually one of the changes I passed on to a GM to pass on to the developers. So hopefully some of my changes are also implemented. I haven't seen any yet besides this one. And the last question is someone complaining about the Devourers being too efficient in Clan War. He even mentioned that there's a group with 4 players running Devourers. Yeah, that sounds pretty gnarly, man. And the dev said, we are closely monitoring the statistics of these weapons in different game modes, and if necessary, we will make changes. In translation, we are still collecting coins and funds from people buying the Devourers, and after we see that nobody's buying them, we're gonna nerf it. I'm just kidding. But basically, that's what everybody thinks anyways. And that is all, folks. I did all the questions anyways. Leave a like for me if you enjoyed it and found it informative. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great day. Peace.